This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? There we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. And we're broadcasting live high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains from the farm today. From the farm. Your classroom reaches 50 states and worldwide on the internet. And wherever you are, you can listen with your smartphone. Free application at gcnlive.com. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Nathan is producing the broadcast in Minnesota, and Ken Hurley is with us in the studio. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thank you, Vince, and it's a great lot of fun to be here, and looking forward to the next wonderful 2 hours.
Today we're going to have 2 hours of very serious topics. Hour number one, economics. And the question, are the markets manipulated? From an expert. Hour number two, a high school girl was raped and murdered. A man was imprisoned. That man is a USAPrepares.com instructor. Today you're going to meet a convicted murderer. His appeals went all the way to the Supreme Court. All failed. He spent 16 years in jail for a crime. The trusted systems of the financial markets and justice have failed us. That's what we're going to discuss today. Starting with economics, hour number one. Many of us have learned economic theory in class. Is that different from observing economics in the real world? With us today is USAPrepares.com instructor Nick Testaccio. Now, Nick was the director of quality assurance at the New York Mercantile Exchange. He's one of us. The New York Mercantile Exchange is now part of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. He spent a major portion of his life in the markets. Welcome, Nick Testaccio.
Good morning, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Nick, it's great to hear your voice. Now, Nick, you are a student who has risen to become an instructor. You are a participant in the class. You pay attention to what we're doing, and over the years, you've decided that you wanted to come to the front of the class and be right here at the blackboard with us. And I really want to thank you for that. You've been on the air with us before, and you have spent a lot of time in the markets. Now, when we talk about economic theory that we've learned in school, and we talk about observing economics, there is a difference, isn't there, Nick?
Absolutely. One of the things I learned when I was growing up in the industry is that obviously different people have a different point of view of what's going on. They see different things. Now, when I was on I've been on a few exchanges, cotton, precious metals, New York Mercantile Exchange, where I was a member for 12, 13 years. And one of the things you find out is that the people in the industry like to speak to brokers or analysts on the floor because they're viewing what's going on through a different set of eyes. They're getting a different set of opinions, and from those opinions and those eyes, they're formulating what they see as reality in the markets. For instance, back in the late 70s, there were bumper crops in the cotton market. Mm-hmm. But the price of cotton was going to all-time highs. nobody actually saw what was going on around, and there were a few people, international brokers and whatnot, who understood that the demand was getting so high, but it hadn't quite reached the public domain at that point. Mm-hmm. I think the crop at that time was in the United States was 16.5 million, and it was quite a bit in excess of the previous years, but yet we kept going higher and higher and higher. And there's an old saying that goes, the market knows before anyone else does. Well, there were people out in the industries that, well, we're not growing enough stuff and we have obligations out here. So what are we going to do? They had to go into the marketplace to see if they can get deliveries in the futures industry so that they can meet their obligations. So when you look at anything in economics, what you basically want to do is you want to see what's happening at the ground level. For years, I'd go into stores. Hey, how you guys doing? How's the business? What do you think here? People buying? Are they laying off? Do you see your regular customers? Are they buying eggs? Are they buying meat instead? And you get a general feel of what's going on. And I always believed that this was the best way to get a good feel of what is actually going on in economics. You, on a number of occasions, have said, I don't know anybody who's doing well, which is, an excellent point, because you want to talk to your neighbors, you want to talk to the people down the road and see if they're going to be truthful with you. A lot of people won't be, but if they're going to be truthful with you, and you're going to get a feel for what's going on out there. And this, to me, is essential if you're going to be in the marketplace, because, like I said, the market knows a lot, much before most of the industry knows what's actually going on, because of the little bits and pieces that are coming in, who's buying at the grocery stores, who's able to supply or whatnot.
Well, Nick, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I do as a person behind the microphone is I talk to a lot of people, Nick, from the very moment I get up. If I'm not on the phone, I'm preparing, and if I'm not on the broadcast classroom, I'm probably on the phone until very late at night. And I ask people, what's happening, and that's why I say I don't know anybody who says, things are going really well. I honestly don't know a single person. But then again, I don't travel in the jet set, and I don't travel with those half of 1%ers who are making all of the money at the expense of the rest of us. I don't travel in those circles, so I don't know those people who might be saying, it's boom time. For the rest of us that are working hard, that are actually making products, it's not good. It's not good. So you said something that I found very interesting. I remember being in finance and economics class, and I heard something like, this was in the 70s, something like what you said. The market knows before anyone else knows. And we were taught that is a leading indicator. So you can look at the market, and you can say, well, the market's going up, so that means things are probably going to be good. But that's changed in the timing, because it used to be that trends were longer term. Now trends can last just a couple seconds.
Well, that's absolutely true. Now, when I generally speak, I speak from the point of view of the raw producers industry, the commodity markets, because at this point in time, as you mentioned, the equities markets are, they're just all over the place, and I don't even want to look at them right now, because I believe that it's simply a manipulated position based on inflation and the current currency crisis we're in. Because when you get into a currency crisis, you tend to move towards hard assets. So people who've been building money all these years, and by building money, I'm talking about the people who got the bailouts and whatnot. Mm-hmm. They're taking that money and they're buying up things because they understand that the dollar is probably going to be next to worthless in the next few years. So you're getting an inflation in prices along those lines. But getting back to raw materials, this is really the nitty gritty of economics, because over the years I was involved with farmers, producers, mills, people all over the country, people in the oil industry who told me from a standpoint of where they were, what they saw. So at this point in time, one of the things we see is that if you go to the supermarket, you'll see inflation that's well above what the government is telling us, what the Fed is saying about it. For instance, you could take a standard can of tuna fish. Well, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, what was it, a 6-7 ounce can, and you could buy it for 50 cents off the shelf.
That's right. 6.5 ounce can.
Right. And now it's a 5 ounce can, and you can't even touch it for less than $1, or at least in my area, you can't. It goes on sale for $1. It's typically $1.50. Now, if you take that out if you extrapolate out and you look at that, well, that's at the low end, it's 17-18% per year on that can of tuna fish alone, and this goes along all produce and boxes of cereal, cans of tomato paste, whatever you want to talk about. There's a built-in inflation in not only price but in size. These are the things that you, as an individual, the class wants to look at when they're understanding what's going on in economics. I hear
Nick,
the bump of music.
Yeah, Nick, hold that thought, and I'll relate a story about soap inflation when we come back. Nick Testascio, USAPrepares.com instructor. I'm Vin Finelli. We'll be right back. Class, we were talking with Nick Testascio about inflation, real inflation, versus what the government is saying that inflation is. And I mentioned a story about soap. Many years ago, I was able to buy soap for $3 but they were 5 ounce bars of soap. Today, you can get 2 for $1, maybe, and they are 3 ounce bars of soap. So, Nick, that's the kind of insidious theft that you're talking about with hidden inflation, size inflation, meaning the size is getting smaller, and sometimes the price goes up, sometimes it doesn't, but when the size goes down and the price goes up, it's like a double hit of inflation.
Well, you know, Vincent, there's a certain point where the distributor. Now, I spoke to an old friend of mine. His family has a food processing business, and I asked him. I said, "What do you think about the price of grains, agriculture at this point?" He says, "Well, you know, it's okay." He said, we can't go beyond a certain point because we're not going to be able to move the stuff in the market. So, generally speaking, what the retailer, what the distributor has to do, the producer has to do is he has to compensate somewhere so that the individual mom or the single dad or whoever does the shopping in the house goes to the supermarket and says, "Well, there's a box of cereal. It's $4. I can afford that. But they don't take into account what they've lost. That box of cereal may have been 16 ounces a few years ago. It's down to 8, 9, 10 ounces or whatever they are now. I don't eat cereal, so I'm not sure, but I do look at the prices. Mm-hmm. So there's a tipping point here that we're talking about where the people who are selling this stuff to you have to make it appetizing, so to speak, mm-hmm. so that you will actually spend your money on this particular product.
So Nick, we're talking about inflation, and do you see any sign of it abating? Do you see any sign of it lessening? Do you see any sign of it going away, or do you see just the opposite?
No, one of the biggest aspects of inflation, which most people don't understand, is the printing of money. The United States has been able to print money indiscriminately for years because it's the reserve currency. Now, other central banks are getting into the same program. Japan, which has stagnated for 2 decades, decides that now, after not being able to move themselves out of the position they were in 20 years ago, they're going to print up the equivalent of $10 trillion, which I don't know what that works out to. I think it's 250,000 yen or something, 250 trillion yen, which is ridiculous at this point because all they're doing is devaluing their currency. And Japan is very dependent on getting essentials from out of the country, oil for one thing. So if they're going to devalue their currency, what's going to happen to the end user who has to buy gas or oil, whatever the case may be, to heat his home, drive his car, run his business? It's a tremendous amount of inflation, and this is happening all over. All the central banks are getting into this, and this is something I really can't understand, but that's a different topic. I can't see inflation going away at this point. We're going to have a major upheaval. The central banks are going to have to step back, and they're going to have to say, that's it. We're out of the game. There's nothing we can do at this point, and economies, monetary systems across the globe are going to have to collapse before we stop the inflation.
Nick, let me see if I heard you right. So you're in agreement that the economic system will collapse?
Yes, I can't see it any other way.
Nick Testaccio, Vince Finelli, Ken Hurley, USAPrepares.com. Class in the studio is Ken Hurley. Nick Testaccio is on with us. We're talking about economics. And just calling in is Colonel Tom Johnson. Tom Johnson is a family friend. We've known him for many years, and he's an author of many, many books. He is the expert in militaria. He's written, I would call it an encyclopedia, a series of volumes on knives, edged weapons, and he's with us right now. Welcome, Colonel Tom Johnson.
Thank you very much, Vance. I appreciate you having me on.
Tom, we're going to be at the Military Antique Extravaganza. I'm going to be broadcasting live from the event, and I'm really excited that you've been able to work out the details so that we'll have the necessary computer communications facilities there at the Monroeville Convention Center. I've been there many times with our family, and we're going to be broadcasting live, and we're going to be talking to some experts right on the floor. Galen David contacted me. He's going to be with me. And, you know, you've got so many experts. Let me ask you this. What are we going to see at this particular event?
Well, Vince, as you well know, having been there, the MAX show is an acronym, of course, for Military Antiques Extravaganza, is a huge military show that's held once annually.
Mm-hmm.
This year, 2013, will be our 30th show. And we are, as you mentioned, in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, PA.
Mm-hmm. And the last time I was there, I saw B-29 bomber parts. I saw Nazi helmets, uniforms, Japanese military, Civil War or the war between the states items. And I think I even saw some, well, I did see a samurai uniform, Panzer tunics, Hitler original painted by Adolf Hitler artwork. At one of your shows, I even bought a piece of Ava Braun's original silver service. I have a spoon from Ava Braun's silver service. So I think it's a fabulous, fabulous show. By the way, my son called me, and Adolf Hitler's ring, his swastika ring, sold for $65,000 and change yesterday. Tom, wasn't it worth more than that?
It's hard to say, Vince, really what some of this military is worth. It's a very, very popular hobby right now. And when you get into the one-of-a-kind items, like the Hitler ring, you're really talking about it's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think that's probably a low price looking at what some of the other artifacts belonging to the top Third Reich leaders sold for.
Mm-hmm.
But make no mistake, the Manx show is not a show about the Third Reich. It's a
right.
military show that's open to military from all wars and all countries. We have a good representation of Civil War dealers, World War I, World War II, Vietnam certainly, which is getting very popular, and also we'll have military from Iraq and Afghanistan right up to the present.
Right. I have some friends who bought Civil War relics, and of course World War I and World War II, Vietnam, even muskets. I have a friend who bought a musket right in front of me. It was really neat. It's you know what it really is. I believe it's probably the largest museum that you can go to at one time and see so much and actually talk to the experts on all the different military items that you could possibly want to see, touch, feel, and buy. Seriously.
I think that's an excellent description. The one difference with the Max show from a museum is the fact that everything at the Max show is actually for sale. And it gives the public that comes in the opportunity to really buy very valuable artifacts that you can't purchase from a museum. What's at the Max is generally for sale.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nick.
A question.
Please join in.
Question about a piece of Revolutionary War equipment. Tom, by the way, it's nice to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
What is a fusile? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's a F-U-Z-Z-E-L, I think is the spelling of it. It's some sort of weapon, maybe it's some sort of musket or something like that.
Unfortunately, I can't help you on that. My own expertise has been primarily in the field of German edge weaponry. Edge weaponry being dress daggers, swords, and bayonets. And I've specialized in edge weaponry from World War I and World War II. So although you might find one of those items at the Max show, it's not in a category that I know.
Okay. All right.
Tom, let me ask you very quickly. Some of the swords, let's just pick a sword. What would be the least expensive for sale sword that you might see? Original sword, authentic, and then that would have been at the Max, and then what would have been the most expensive that you know of?
Well, Vince, you can probably find common swords common military or military swords at the MAX show. I would say for as little money as probably $100, and
Okay.
there's also swords that have been in the MAX show that have subsequently sold in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm. I know of a sword that that we looked at that was for sale. It was Damascus many years ago. We did not buy it. It was $6,500, and then later on it was sold for maybe $40,000, and then maybe $65,000, and then well over $100,000 for this very same sword as it changed owners. So there is some appreciation potential if you buy the right items. Isn't that correct?
It's absolutely correct. I started in this field in 1960 as a young second lieutenant assigned to an army unit in Munich, Germany. And at that time, of course, the dollar was very strong at that time. In 1960, early 1960, you got 4.2 Deutschmarks to the dollar, which
Mm-hmm.
was very favorable from the U.S. standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I was buying German daggers in that time frame in Munich, original German daggers, for as low as $8 a piece. And now those same daggers are worth in the hundreds of dollars each.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Tom Johnson, I'm really looking forward to being with you and Tom Whitman and the rest of the faculty at the MAX Show 2013, 30th year. This is October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And you can just, how would you like us to get to the MAX information?
Well, we have our own website. It's an updated website. It's up and running and has been for the last several years, but we've recently updated it. Vince, it's www.themaxshow, all lowercase, themaxshow.com.
There you go, class. So if you're interested, I will be there, and if you'd like to say hello and meet some of the faculty of USAPrepares.com, themaxshow.com, October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Tom, thanks so much for being with us today. It's always delightful chatting with you, and maybe Colonel Tom Johnson will have a couple minutes to swing by and hop behind the microphone on October 3rd and 4th. I know he's really busy. This is a huge show. Thousands and thousands of people. It is the largest military show of its kind in the country. Tom, thanks so much for being with us.
Vince, you're welcome. Good talking to you, and we look forward to welcoming you to the show.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Nick, very interesting show, and I'm delighted to be part of it. So let's talk about a little bit more about the economics and the rigging of the market. Nick, how's the market rigged? Why don't we just start with the silver market or the gold market? How's it rigged?
Well, gold and I think the precious metals markets now are really a joke because we're talking about the price being based on the paper market over at COMEX. It's not a tremendously large market, but one thing that's happened over the years is the abrogation of the large trader report. If you're a producer or an end user in the business, you would have to fill out a report. Right? You're allowed a certain position without telling the CFTC, I have 500 contracts of gold, and it's perfectly legitimate for me to have that. But once I get past 500-600, I don't know what the edge is on that. But I can't remember at this point. But once you get to a certain point, you have to explain to the CFTC why you have this position, because if push comes to shove and you have to deliver it or you have to take delivery of it, they have to make sure that you either have the capital to take it or you have the product to deliver it. Now, in the case of places like J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, whatnot, they certainly don't have the product that they're short in the market or was short in the market, because I'm not quite sure what it is, what their positions are right now, because that's been obfuscated. They would never be able to deliver those positions into the market. I think at one point J.P. Morgan was short more than there was silver available in the entire country. And they would have to be taking it out of the mines for the next couple of years in order to make the deliveries on it. So one of the things that's happened here is that the CFTC, now this is the government again, has faulted on their duty to make sure that we're conducting honest business in the futures markets.
Wow. Class, you just heard it. You heard it from someone who knows. We all thought it. You heard it right here on USAPrepares.com. Nick Testaccio is going to be with us for the rest of this hour. Nick Testaccio is with us, and he's been with us before, and I'm looking forward to seeing Nick at one of our Get Prepared Expos. I really am. Got a great insight on the markets. Nick, you said that the government has failed us with the CFTC in making sure that the short sales by some of these investment banks are covered, and the fact is that they cannot cover the shorts, right?
Yeah, as far as we know, they can't possibly deliver. I haven't looked at what the inventories are now, but I have to talk to some friends about that and see if they can tell me where they are at this point. But certainly, J.P. Morgan a few months ago at the beginning of the year had a position that was astronomical as compared to what silver was available.
Yeah, so, and I understand that the thought right now is that President Barack Obama is looking to tap, Larry Summers to head the Fed.
Yeah, well.
And no economist would want that.
Well, there are economists who do want it, but you're not going to see them on, on your show. but they'll be on CNBC or CNN or ABC and NBC spouting the line for the government. I do want to just touch on a couple of points here.
Sure, please do.
Because we're talking about manipulation. And one thing that's happened recently is that there's a poor demand for U.S. Treasuries. First of all, the Fed is keeping the rates very low, and foreign investors have been dumping Treasuries. Mm-hmm. So the Federal Reserve has been buying up whatever they can, and they've moved their balance sheet from I think $1 trillion. I think it's now something like $3.5 trillion that they have sitting with these bonds and bills. They're the ones who are doing most of the buying in the markets, and whoever else they tap to be in there and buy up whatever they can. That's one thing that they can do to make the overall economy, and this ties in with precious metals because it's a wrapped around plan, so to speak. You're keeping gold and silver down. You're keeping treasuries rates lower so that we get the perception that all is right with the world, but it's not in actuality. One other thing that's going to be important is I've read recently that some of the largest mortgage lenders out there, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and I think Chase are the largest lenders out there. They're going to be looking to lay off as many as 20,000 people and close some of their offices. And I can't believe that they're doing this because they think that the housing market is going to be booming anytime soon.
I absolutely agree. And as I look around, I see grass growing up in the parking lots, in the cracks of the parking lots because cars are not driving over them, because parking lots of businesses are empty compared to what they used to be. The traffic is not there. We don't see the traffic on the streets. I don't see the commerce. I literally believe that in small retail business, sales are down 75% since the last 2 years. That's my belief. In my opinion, 75% down in sales over the last 2 years. Nick Testaccio, thank you so much for being with us. It's always a pleasure to have you. I'm really looking forward to having you back again and again and again. And I'd like to talk about, next time, your farm project for autistic children, your dream. Let's talk about that next time you come back on the air.
Sure.
Thanks so much for being with us, Nick.
Thank you.
Coming up next, a high school girl was raped and murdered, and a man was imprisoned. He is a USAPrepares.com instructor. You're going to get a chance to meet him. Next hour, a murderer. That's what he was convicted of. And we're going to tell you the truth, what really happened, when we come back after the top of the hour. Stay tuned.
Is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Class, this is a very, very serious topic. You might not believe what you're about to hear. I want you to think very, very carefully of what this means to you and your family. About 16 years ago, a high school girl was raped and murdered. And a man was imprisoned for that murder. That man is a USAPrepares.com instructor. You're going to meet him right now. A convicted murderer. His appeals went all the way, multiple appeals went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. All appeals failed. That man spent 16 years in jail. Maximum security. Hard time. For murder. It was found out through DNA evidence that that man did not commit the crime. Now, I want you to think, please, think about your worst fear. Might it be that you would be hauled away and arrested, put in jail, facing a lifetime of hard time, in prison, with thugs and rapists and sex offenders, others in control of your life, and you didn't do the crime? The trusted system, the system that we believed in, failed us. We're going to discuss that today. Jeffrey Deskovic was convicted wrongly of murder. He spent 16 hard years in maximum security. Jeffrey, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Vincent.
You know, what we're going to discuss should be sending chills up everyone's spine. Jeffrey, why don't we start with what happened? What happened to you that caused, what were the events that led up to this? You were 16 years old.
I was 16 years old at the time I was arrested, yes. A high school classmate in Peekskill, New York, which is in Westchester County, was found murdered and raped. Peekskill was a really small town with a population of, say, 25,000 people, and murders were very rare. When this murder happened, understandably, it created an atmosphere of fear, rumor, and paranoia. Parents were concerned with their own safety as well as the safety of their children. In the course of the police investigation, they interviewed some of the students in the school, and some of them told the police that they might want to talk to me because I was quiet, I was withdrawn, I was to myself. So this is what the police said initially attracted them to me. The other factor which they said attracted them to me was that they said that I was overly upset at the victim having been murdered. Yet this murder shook up the whole town to the point where free mental health services were offered to the entire city. The other factor, which I guess was a reinforcement, was that they had the NYPD put together a profile of what they thought the actual perpetrator would resemble, and I happened to match that. Ultimately, I was driven from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, transported to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County, and I was coerced into a false confession, which ultimately led to my wrongful conviction.
Jeffrey, how is it possible that a police department could coerce a person, you, into how'd they do it? What are the techniques that they use?
Sure, it's a great question because it seems on its face to be counterintuitive. But, in point of fact, false confessions are the cause of wrongful convictions, and 25% of the now 311 DNA-proven wrongful convictions. And although adults have been known to be coerced into false confession experts have identified particularly vulnerable populations as being youth as well as those with mental health problems. Here are the tactics they employed, specifically in my case. First, they drove me to the town of Brewster, which was on a school day. So firstly, that meant I didn't know where I was. I was totally dependent on the police. Neither my mother nor my grandmother, with whom I lived with, realized that anything was wrong because it was a school day. They thought I was in school, and hence they did not call around looking for me. They put me into a small room. I didn't have an attorney present. I wasn't given anything to eat the entire time I was there. They attached a polygraph machine to me. The polygraphist himself was actually Putnam County Sheriff's investigator by the name of Daniel Stevens, who was pretending to be a civilian. Before starting the polygraph test, he gave me countless cups of coffee, and the reason why that's important is because the premise of the polygraph is that when a person lies, you'll become nervous, and your nervousness will result in a sped up pulse rate, and it is that pulse rate which is actually read by the machine. The problem is that other factors which will cause the pulse rate to speed up would include fear and caffeine. So the coffee was part of the setup. They played good cop, bad cop, in which one officer takes on a more aggressive role where the other pretends to be a friend who's opposed to what's happening, yet somehow powerless to intervene. And, of course, the purpose of that is that when a person's being questioned, it didn't become frightened. It's only natural to look to a friendly face for assistance. So there were 3 police officers over there, Lieutenant Tumlo, Detectives McIntyre and Levine, and then the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens, who was pretending not to be a cop. So they put me in a small room, and he started his third-degree tactics. I mean, he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. He got getting more and more ferocious as each hour passed. As each hour passed, so too did my fear grow in proportion to the time. Towards the end of the interrogation, he made a statement to me, and he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm this." So at that point, my fear really shot through the roof. And it was at that point that the police officer, who was Pretending to be my friend, he entered the room, and he informed me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he was holding them off, but could not do so indefinitely, that I had to help myself. Considering that I had maintained my innocence for the previous 7.5 hours, it was clear what he meant by that. They wanted me to confess. And it was added that if I did as they wanted, not only would they stop what they were doing, but that I could go home afterwards. Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long-term implications, instead being concerned with my own safety in the moment, I took the out which they offered. I made up a statement. I made up a story based upon information which they had given me in the course of their interrogation. By the police officer's own testimony, by the end of the interrogation, I was on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Needless to say, I was arrested. I was charged with the murder and rape. Now, before I went to trial, the results of a DNA test result came in from the FBI lab, which showed that semen found in the victim didn't match. But instead of acknowledging they made a mistake, they instead continued to prosecute me full speed ahead. And this is where prosecutorial misconduct on the part of Prosecutor George Bowen and the medical examiner, Dr. Louis Rowe, comes into play. Firstly, when an autopsy is done, the written and audio notes are done contemporaneously as the findings are made. It was only after the DNA didn't match, 6 months after doing that initial autopsy, that suddenly for the first time the medical examiner claimed that he found evidence that the victim, a 15-year-old immigrant from Colombia living a really sheltered life in the country for a mere year and a half, in which she never went out save accompanied by her parents or her older sister, that she had been sexually active, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to claim that it didn't matter, that my semen wasn't found in her because it could have come from consensual sex. He even took it a step further, naming somebody by name that he claimed that the victim had this encounter with. Yet he never performed a DNA test to prove that assertion. He just made, nor did he call this other youth as a witness to give verbal testimony. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. At the same time, the lawyer that was representing me, a public defender, because I didn't have any money with which to hire a private lawyer, nor did my family, he was not very good. Here's some of the things that he did and didn't do. Firstly, when the medical examiner committed that fraud and it was time for cross-examination, he stood up in open court and, with a big smile on his face, as if him and the medical examiner were friends from way back in the day, said to him, "You're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you." He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me, nor used it to argue that the so-called confession was coerced and false. He never interviewed nor called as a witness my alibi. I was, in fact, playing wiffle ball at the time that the crime was committed. The judge came to him off the record when we hadn't decided what type of trial we were going to have and said to him, "Pick a jury because I don't want to be responsible for finding your client not guilty." Then he was supposed to call this other youth as a witness, investigate him, and just generally explode the whole consensual sex theory in order to make the DNA test results stand up, except that he should have never represented me from the first place because that other youth was represented not only by another member of the Legal Aid Society, but in fact his supervisor, who was supposed to be advising him as to my case, so that conflict of interest hindered justice.
Class, what you are hearing is absolutely terrifying. It is your worst fear right here. You're hearing it live on usapreparedness.com. Jeffrey Deskovic now is speaking out about the injustice of the system. We'll be right back. It's not often that I'm at a loss for words, but Ken Hurley's in the studio with me. We're broadcasting live from the farm today. And that's because we're going up to Indiana to come to the rescue of a farmer, Mark Baker, who has been threatened by the Department of Natural Resources of the state of Michigan. They want him to kill his farm animals, and he's facing a $700,000 fine. The fine is probably up to $1.5 million. The state of Michigan is threatening this man. They're saying that his pigs are wild. They're not wild. And so some of the USAPrepares.com instructors are going to his rescue. If you'd like to learn more about where we're going this weekend, go to USAPrepares.com, page 1, and you can read the post. And if you'd like to join us, we'd love to meet you and say hello. So we're going to Seven Sons Farm. We'll be there tomorrow, Saturday. So if you'd like to come see us and say hello and support your safe food, we will be there. We'd love to see you. Post is on the website. But Ken Hurley's in the studio with me, and the Dollarhites are coming, John and Judy Dollarhite. They should be here very shortly. And Ken was looking at me during the break, and I was absolutely speechless. And I said, I'm speechless. Jeffrey Deskovic is with us. He's our newest instructor. He's been convicted of murder. He's been exonerated. And it's the worst thing that I think could happen. We have a polygraph administrator for the government who acted as if he was a civilian. We've had the good guy, bad cop, good cop, bad cop, playing mental games with a 16-year-old, totally at the disadvantage of the 16-year-old. They forced a confession out of him. They ramped him up and amped him up on coffee to make the polygraph work against the alleged criminal. The whole system was working against Jeffrey Deskovic. And you're going to find out this went all the way to the Supreme Court. And they didn't help. Jeffrey, the medical examiner committed fraud. They coerced a confession out of you. You were 16 years old, frightened, never been through anything like this before, all alone, being mentally bruised, beaten, bludgeoned by these thugs that work for us. This whole thing is outrageous. How long did they deprive you of food?
The entire time I was there. I was there for at least 7.5 hours.
How about something to drink?
No. Well, yeah, they provided me with plenty of coffee, but beyond that, no.
And were you a habitual coffee drinker prior to this?
Absolutely not.
Wow. Wow. You know, class, if you're not a coffee drinker and you have a couple of cups of coffee, it really messes you up. And so they're yelling at you, screaming at you, just like you see on TV?
Yes, they were. And, you know, I want to add that I was in fear of my life.
Well, sure.
When he made the threat that the officers were going to harm me, and it dawned on me, nobody knew where I was, that, you know, and that I didn't even know really where I was afraid of my life. I was afraid of my life.
Were you in handcuffs?
No, I was not. It was only after they forced their story from me that they put me in handcuffs.
Did they lie to you?
Yes, they did. Yes, because they got me to agree to take the polygraph in the first place, because for a period of 6 weeks prior to that, they played this mental game with me in which half the time they would talk to me as if I was a suspect, and the other half the time they would pretend as though that I was their assistant, like, you know, they needed my help to solve the crime. They would say things to me like, the kids won't talk freely around us, they will around you, let us know if you hear any rumors, stop in from time to time. And so in that context, they asked me to take the polygraph. They claimed that they had some new information that had come in that would be helpful would be helpful if they were able to share it with me, but they needed me to take and pass a polygraph. So a convoluted help us to help you to help us type of thing was the ruse that they utilized in order to get me to agree to the test in the first place.
Did you know that you could have refused the polygraph, or did they let you think that you couldn't refuse?
Once they wired me up to the machine and started interrogating me, carrying on like that, I didn't think I could stop anything.
Class, John Jay was one of the founding fathers of the United States, and he was the first Chief Justice of the United States. And a college of criminal justice was named after him, John Jay. It's the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. It's in New York, and it is one of the top 10 colleges of criminal justice in the United States of America. Jeffrey Deskovic is a graduate of John Jay. He graduated with a master's degree. You can hear he's articulate, succinct, to the point. Jeffrey, when you must be considered the most improved student ever at John Jay. Convicted of murder to having a master's degree in criminal justice.
I agree. It's mind-boggling. I still can't believe it myself.
Let me ask you, how old are you right now?
38.
So you're 38. You've spent, you've spent a lot of time, 16 years behind bars for a crime that you did not commit. Is this the point? Look, Jeff, we're going to have to go. This is 101, class 101. We'll go through 102, 103, 104, 105. We have a lot more that we need to talk about. Would you like to continue about what happened, or would you like to talk about what prison is like? And we can go into in-depth in future classes. Where would you like to go? What makes the most sense to you at this point?
I'd like to discuss my legal odyssey, and then from there discuss the prison experience.
Okay, let's go right into the legal odyssey.
Okay, so at the day of I couldn't believe when the jury pronounced the words guilty, because to my way of thinking, at least up until that point in time, only guilty people were convicted. Mm-hmm. Yet they said what they did, and I was taken into custody. On the day of the sentencing, I begged the judge to overturn the verdict because I was innocent, and I referenced the DNA to support my contention. Fasten your seatbelts on this one, Vince. He actually told me, on the record, maybe you are innocent, conceding that there was doubt. But that didn't lead him to step up for justice and exercise his discretion by overturning the verdict. Instead, he took the easy, politically expedient way out of sentencing me to a term of imprisonment of 15 to life. Let me explain how the legal system continued to fail me in an all too typical rubber stamp denial variety that is normally the order of the day in the appellate process. I went to the appellate division with my primary issues being, number one, my innocence as demonstrated by the DNA, and that my Fifth Amendment rights had been violated. The appellate division found nothing wrong with the way I'd been questioned, and furthermore, they ruled that, in their opinion, that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which makes no sense because the forensics were on my behalf. They ruled against me 5-0. My lawyer moved to re-argue the case in front of them, arguing that their decision was contrary to the facts of the law, but the re-argument motion was denied. I went to the New York State Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state, where the procedure is that you have to obtain permission from the court before they'll agree to actually get to the merits of your issues. Court of Appeals told me that there was no merit in law to justify reviewing my case, and so they were declining to give me permission to appeal to them. I then went to federal court, filing a petition for writ of habeas corpus, which is when a state prisoner is arguing that his or her conviction is running contrary to the United States Constitution. Again, my issues primarily were my innocence and my Fifth Amendment rights. Now, at that time, there was confusion in the federal court system because 1 year prior, Congress had passed and President Clinton had signed into law the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which in relevant parts stated that all state prisoners would have 1 year to file in federal court after being denied by their state's highest court. The confusion in the system centered around how would this new law apply to cases already in the system, and different jurisdictions were answering the question in different ways. So my attorney called the court clerk and asked, would it be enough that my petition simply be postmarked on the due date, or did it have to be physically filed in the building on the due date? The court clerk told my attorney that it would be enough that my petition be postmarked. Unfortunately, that turned out to be false, and as a result of that, my petition arrived 4 days too late. Former Westchester County District Attorney Janine Pirro, who now has a judge show, by the way, Justice with Janine and Judge Janine Pirro, her office took the position that those 4 days were somehow prejudicial to the people, and therefore the court should simply rule that I was late without getting to the merits of my arguments. And that is exactly the position that the court took. That meant I was time-barred, which meant I was no longer able to argue my issues directly, but I was instead relegated to arguing that the procedural ruling against me was inaccurate. So I appealed that ruling to the Federal Court of Appeals, where the judges on the circuit were Rosemary Pooler and future United States Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. My attorney advanced the following arguments as to why the procedural ruling should be overturned. That number one, it was not a delay caused by myself or my attorney, but by the court clerk. That upholding a ruling such as that would be to cause a miscarriage of justice to continue, which introduces the DNA and the innocence argument as a contextual issue. And that overturning the procedural ruling would open the door for more sophisticated DNA testing of the type which would go on to clear me 7 years later. Once again, the DA opposed, and once again, the court sided with the district attorney. My lawyer moved to re-argue the case in front of them, requesting that all the judges on that circuit, en banc, hear and rule on the case. But the re-argument motion was again denied by Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Rosemary Pooler. I then applied to the U.S. Supreme Court to seek permission, but they declined to give that to me. That marked the end of my appeals and the end of legal representation. By this time, we're in 2001, so I have about 10, 11 years in at that point. So, with my appeals exhausted, I was no longer furnished with any sort of legal representation. So the path going forward would be that I'd have to somehow find an attorney who would take my case for free, find an investigator who would do the same, and then hope that together, in conjunction, that they could somehow find some previously unknown evidence of innocence, without which the court was no longer willing to hear from me. So I began this massive letter-writing campaign for the next 4 to 5 years, writing reporters, faith-based organizations, not-for-profit agencies, you name it. If there was a line of reasoning that I could come up with in my mind as to how they could help me either directly or indirectly, I took it and I wrote. And I very rarely heard back from anybody. Eventually, I accidentally wound up in touch with an investigator. I was actually writing a book author in care of the publishing company, and someone at the company sent the letter to the investigator, whose name was Claudia Whitman. She wrote me back right away. She tried to get places to take my case, and she gave me ideas. One of her ideas turned out to be the winning one, which was Right the Innocence Project, which is a not-for-profit-based group in Manhattan, which works to clear wrongfully convicted prisoners in instances where DNA testing can demonstrate innocence. The problem with them, when I originally wrote in 92 and 93, was that we didn't have a DNA data bank, and they had never encountered a case in which a conviction had taken place in the face of a pre-existing DNA exclusion. So the DNA couldn't be used as something new at that point. So the investigator told me that with the advent of advancement in technology, the prior denial was irrelevant. So write them again. So I did that, and about 6 months later, seemingly out of the blue, they wrote me back and informed me that they were taking my case. By this time, Pirro had left office, and her successor agreed to allow me to have further DNA testing without having to litigate over it. And the results matched that of the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was only in the data bank because left free, while I did time for his crime, he struck again, killing another victim 3.5 years later. Confronted with this evidence, he admitted he was the person who committed the crime. So on September 20th, 2006, my conviction was overturned, went back to court on November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges against me were dismissed on the grounds of actual innocence. He, on the other hand, was arrested, pled guilty, and was sentenced for the crime. And at that point, I was free to start my life over again without any governmental assistance.
Wow. Let me see if I've got this right. You were wrongfully imprisoned.
Yeah.
They let you out of prison because they should have.
Yes.
And they didn't help you in any way, shape, or form figure out what to do next?
You understand correctly.
Jeffrey, You have been brutalized to the greatest extent. You have been withheld from a lot of what was happening socially, economically, technologically. You have missed 16 years of your life, and these guys say, okay, get out of here. Did anybody ever apologize for all the wrongs?
No. The sad commentary, the only person who had a hand in anything that apologized, and this speaks to how low the people who were involved in this, were. The only person who apologized was the actual perpetrator, who in a deposition in the course of my litigation from the stand, he apologized to me, claiming that if he knew that if I was in prison doing time for his crime, he would have come forward. Other than that, nobody, none of the actors involved in what happened to me ever apologized.
They stole 16 years of your life, possibly a quarter to a fifth to a sixth of it, your best years.
Yes.
No one apologized. Jeffrey Deskovic, do you think that these guys have notches on their guns, notches on their badges, and they are striving to get an increase in recognition, an increase in visibility, an increase in income as a result of putting people in jail, whether they deserve it or not?
Without a doubt. The lieutenant wound up becoming the police chief. Bureau, who helped keep the ball rolling to me, got her judge show, which I can only, presume makes far more money than she would as a DA. The prosecutor, got points for winning the case. The polygraphist received a recommendation letter from the then Lieutenant Tumalo, which he then
Jeffrey,
used to...
hold that thought. We'll name the names when we come back. Unbelievable story. Jeffrey Deskovic was convicted of murder wrongfully. And all the characters, all the players seem to have done really well, except for Jeffrey. Jeffrey, let's go through that one more time. So what happened? We've got one person became the chief of police. Another person became a TV star as a judge. Let's go through that, please.
Sure. The polygraphist himself made quite a little career for himself, largely on my back, because after receiving the recommendation letter for what he did to me with the polygraph, he got a lot of pre-employment polygraph work in Peekskill. Mm-hmm. And the judge who kept things going against me as far as on the federal court level, sustaining twice the 4 days late technicality I went over before, Sonia Sotomayor, became a U.S. Supreme Court justice. So everybody...
wow. We have a Supreme Court justice, we have a chief of police, we have a movie star or a TV star, all on the backs of people who were beaten by the system. Outrageous. Jeffrey, have you heard from any of the jury?
I did. One of the jurors contacted my civil rights lawyer, and she informed my lawyer that she had saw news coverage of my exoneration, and that she was happy that I was free because she never thought that I was guilty. And so my lawyer...
Well, hold it right there. You're saying that one of the jurors was happy that you were released because she thought you weren't guilty?
Yes.
So she was involved in your conviction, and she was happy because you were released. How did she reconcile that? She was one that put you in maximum security prison for 16 years.
You're right. She doesn't reconcile it. She offers the following other statements for whatever any of the listeners might take it to be worth. My lawyer asked her the obvious question, well, if you didn't think he was guilty, why did you vote that way? And she said that at that point it was 11-1 towards conviction. She was the last holdout, and she said that she felt pressured. And furthermore, the jury had sent out a question to the judge asking that if they didn't come up with a decision, whether they would be sequestered over the Christmas vacation or whether they'd be allowed to go home to their families and come back. And upon learning that they would in fact be sequestered, that's why, they didn't want to be sequestered. That was why she just gave in. So in order to, I guess, enjoy her turkey dinner and time with her family, she rushed out of there, even though she remained unconvinced by their argument, by any of the other jurors' arguments as to the merits of my innocence or guilt. And I got out of there and got back to my family 16 years later.
Jeffrey, you're saying that a woman was so concerned about her turkey dinner and meeting her family for Christmas that they threw you overboard. Is that what you're saying?
It is, in no uncertain terms.
It's a national disgrace. Absolute national disgrace. I'm outraged. I would love to have her on the air with me and have her explain to the world exactly why she was derelict in her duty as a juror. There's got to be a special place in hell for people who don't take their obligations seriously and are willing to throw someone overboard and actually put you in jail for the rest of your life for a crime you didn't commit because she's worried about her turkey dinner and her Christmas. I'm outraged. Jeffrey, there's a website, page 1, usaprepares.com, points to it. The Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice.org. Jeffrey, I'd like to invite you to come back again and again with me. Is that something that you would consider?
Absolutely, I would love to, because as much as we've covered today, the story is much bigger than that, and I'd love to be able to share it with the world. I think that it's educating